Shabbat Shalom. Today we're going to study the last words of Moses in his life, very important words that in our time lead up to the feast of Rosh Hashanah, of the Israeli New Year. Better said, the feast of trumpets, the feast of the wake-up calls, a feast that also calls for introspection, for looking at your life and your behavior and the improvements, hopefully, or the lack thereof, and all these things work together to make us better people. That's the goal, in God's eyes, I mean. So let's start with the first text today, and the theme is that there are 7 steps in the text of the Torah that help us to turn or return to God and build, or allow at least, not build, but to allow God to build pieces of eternity in ourselves. We have God's Spirit in us, which also means a down payment of that what is to come in the age after this one, in the world that is not this one. So all these things are very important to know, and so close by you have this Torah in your hands. It's not just dry legalistic rules. They are there too. Sometimes rules nobody knows what they mean, like the red heifer, but also instructions how to become a better person. So let's go into the text, and we'll begin with the Torah text, Deuteronomy chapter 30. And we read from, it is from 29 verse 9, where the text is, the words are used that are the name of this text today. Nitzavim is the Hebrew text, the week text of today. The Parashat Nitzavim is pointing at the people who are standing there listening to Moses, and it's really an interesting text because it draws not only them but also us to those words. Moses talks about that. We'll see that. Come to that. 29 verse 9 through chapter 30 verse 20 in the Hebrew, and verse 8 in the English text. But we're reading from chapter 30 verse 11 through 14. For this commandment which I command to you this day is not too hard for you, neither is it far off. It's not in heaven, that you should say, who will go up for us to heaven and bring it to us, that we may hear it and do it. Neither is it beyond the sea, that you should say, who will go over the sea for us and bring it to us, that we may hear it and do it. But the word is very near to you. It is in your mouth, in your heart, so that you can do it. So far so good. Almost the feast of shofar, so good. But at this moment it is so far so good. Moses shows us today in his Torah what the secret is after all those events, all those experiences where Israel had to go through. And today Israel is blessed and taken into the covenant. And you might say, didn't that happen before? And you're right. And you're wrong at the same time, because there is not a one thing without the other. There's a beginning, then there is a ripening, which is today, and then there is the fruit of it, which comes finally. We read in chapter 29, verse 9 through 15, that these things have a time of growing and developing. And you see that in this text in Deuteronomy 29, verse 9 through 15. I'm going to read it also, it's on the screen. Therefore be careful to do the words of this covenant, that you may prosper in all that you do. You see, it is a very practical covenant that we have. You stand, or at least the text of the covenant. You stand this day, all of you, this is this Nitzavim title, before the Lord your God. The heads of your tribes, your elders, your officers, all the men of Israel, the little ones, your wives, and the sojourner, the non-Jew who is in the camp. It's all included. Both he who hears your word and who draws your water. To hew the wood and draw the water, that you may enter into the sworn covenant of the Lord your God, which the Lord your God makes with you this day. Not then, yes also, but also today. That he may establish you this day as his people, and that he may be your God as he promised you, and as he has sworn to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Nor is it with you only that I make all of you, that I make this sworn covenant, also with the person who is not here today with us, as well as with him or her who stands here with us this day before the Lord your God. So not only the people standing there at the time, but also the people who are not there. He's talking about us. He knew this. This leader is an incredible high-level leader because he realizes and he talks and he communicates not only in his time to the people of his time, but also to us. He realizes that he is building a monument that people flock to and enjoy and experience this presence of God. This is still a quiet hint to all of us that whatever kind of leadership, whatever level of leadership, to one person, to a group of people, in a class as a teacher, in a family, congregation, leadership is not only family building, is a friendship. It is not only for the persons that you see, but you're building a covenant in long-lasting friendships, relationships, in marriages with family, with children. It's very important that you realize that you're building on a monument, which is so sad when a marriage breaks up. The monument crumbles down. So this is very important to know. This text shows that this is a hint for them then and for us now to see that there is a future behind you, and you need to be really a conscious person on this timeline that you're on, that we're all on. So we read what Moses said in 29 verse 9 through 15, and so you might ask them, what happened in the time that we read about in Exodus when this covenant was cut? Well, Moses officially initiated this covenant that the Lord spoke about on Mount Sinai. And you read about it in the book of Exodus, and we did. People were sprinkled with the blood of sacrificial animals. That was it. Totally official, totally the covenant there. And then came the 40 years of ripening and of cleaning and cleansing, and some fell away, and others stood the test. Finally, on the last day of his life, Moses is making this covenant as a closure and as a crowning, to show that what God says is one thing. Sounds a little strange what I'm saying, is one thing, as if there is another thing that's more important or equal, but it is important. It's not equal, but it is very important. Our response and our implementation and our commitment need to be in line with that word. God is waiting for that. Yes, he is without conditions. Unconditional love from God to us, yes, on the one hand, but no on the other hand. Once we're in, then he expects everything from us. And so it's one thing what the Lord says. There's another thing, our response is watching what we're doing with this, which is doing the will of God in our lives. And it's not only his will, it's also our benefit. And our later behavior should be better than the first, earlier, former behavior, not the other way around. Sometimes it's how that goes, it's the other way around. We start very enthusiastic, very involved, all of a sudden we're bored, like Garfield, and sleeping all day. What happened? So what happened when this day that Moses is talking about is there, presents itself, and the covenant is cut again? It is the making up the bill and looking what was taking place and saying, now you might have, it's like perhaps a relation, very dear relationship that you have, or a marriage or something like that, where you, as it were, marry again, or at least read the wedding vows again, in order to show and make up and evaluate how it has been. So what happened at the moment that Yeshua is saying, with this cup I initiate the new covenant, which is the repetition of the old covenant of Moses, with a form change, not a content change, but a form change, being the law not only on stone, but in hearts. 2,000 years ago now. During his last Pesach meal, also that was an official closure of the new covenant. Also official. Completely with the sprinkling of, what shall I say, because of the death and the resurrection of Messiah Yeshua, there is also in the New Testament there is mentioned the blood of Yeshua. But it's not the blood of his body, because think of how it goes. There's nothing that you can compare in the time, in the death, in the sacrifice of Yeshua with any of the animal sacrifices in the book of Leviticus. Compare and you see all the changes. Not in the city of Jerusalem, not on an altar, not with a cut through the arteries, the main veins in the neck of a human being. There is no human sacrifice in the Bible except Yeshua, but then in a different way, by the crucifixion that many people went through, and his was the same and different. So what is that blood? It's the blood of Yeshua. Yes, it's his possession, as everything is, because he's the creator of the earth. We read in the New Testament. But it's the blood that was put on the doors of Israel in that last night in the land of Egypt. That is his blood. That's why he's called the Lamb of God. That is why in Matthew 27, verse 25, all the people said, his blood be on us and on our children. That is an expression, a Jewish expression, and everybody knows that it's not the official, literal blood of a person, but it is, as it were, his blood be on us and our children, which at the time was an excitement and an expression of commitment and of a close connection that these people had, thousands and thousands and tens of thousands later on. In Book of Acts, chapter 21, verse 20, around verse 20, you find that tens of thousands, in the literal text in the Greek, not in your translation perhaps, tens of thousands of people were followers of this Jewish Messiah. After that, like with Moses, there were 40 years after the time of Yeshua, 40 years in the actual number of 2,000 years of cleansing, of countries, testing of individuals, like the time of Moses. They went through that also until the last day of Moses on earth, until the last day, the final day of all of us will come. And then God's loved ones, people that love him, that fear him, are in awe for him, do his will be blessed into that new covenant that was already cut and made by Yeshua, initiated. And yet the time on earth that you and I are going through is the time of testing. Then at the end, Yeshua will close and bring into closure that covenant as a closure and crown moment, to show that what God says is one thing, but that our reaction, our response, our involvement, our input needs to follow. So Moses brought the covenant to a closure, and we read about it today on the day that closed off the old period of being hunters and being people who were traveling, nomads, and a new period would start. So Yeshua will also, with this new covenant with us, promised by a Jewish prophet, Jeremiah, being the same covenant as Moses, but now not on stone, but in our hearts. More intense, therefore. He will close this new covenant and bring to a closure this new covenant on the day that we close our journey on planet Earth, in this world, and go and prepare us for the travel in a new period, which is entering paradise, a new world, another world than this one, because his kingdom is not of this world. So why the blessing of this covenant? To let us know that we belong to the Lord, to let us know that he expects from us in royal kingly behavior, doing what the king is asking us. Moses makes known that there is also on that day after 40 years still people that are longing, looking back, watching back to their old behavior, to their old where they came from situation. Knowledge of the old situation is good. Compare it. Make an inventory of your life, like the 12 steps of Anonymous Alcoholics Anonymous, among others, are saying. But don't long back, and don't long to get there again. Looking at the gods and the habits of the other peoples around them. So he makes known how very important that time has been, those 40 years, lying between the first cutting of the covenant and the second one. And he talks about making things right. He calls for teshuvah, is the Hebrew term, meaning to come to knowledge, turn around, open your heart, open your eyes, renewal, spiritual development and growth. Putting down your old vestments, your yetzer hara, the old nature, your old inclinations, your old behavior, and putting on the new one, the new man, doing God's will with an openness and a curiosity that makes it very attractive, showing new behavior. People don't know that you are a believer by what you say, but what you do. Showing new behavior and continuously showing that new behavior, not only when people are there, and not only now, but also until your dying day. In chapter 30, in the first paragraph, the word shuv in Hebrew is mentioned in different verb, in different parsing situations and meanings. So those first 10 verses I'd like to read, and they are, again, in Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 1 through 10. And when all these things come upon you, the blessing and the curse, I need to interrupt myself and say that the word curse is not what you think of it today. It's not voodoo or things like that. It is just the fine print in the covenant, like when you buy a car or a house or whatever you buy on credit. There is, of course, there needs to be a line that is spent on when you don't do well by not paying up to what belongs to the person who gave something to you. Let's continue. And when all these things come upon you, the blessing and the curse which I have set before you, and you take them to heart, that's the first of the 7 times that this verb of turning around, of opening yourself, renewing yourself, or being renewed. Take them to heart among all the nations where the Lord your God has driven you, and return to the Lord, that's the second one, you and your children, and obey his voice in all that I command you this day, with all your heart and with all your soul. Then, verse 3, the Lord your God will, that's the third one, restore your fortunes, is one translation, and have compassion upon you, and he will gather you in, that's the fourth one. He will gather you in from all the peoples where the Lord your God has scattered you. If your outcasts are in the uttermost parts of heaven, From there the Lord your God will gather you, and from there he will fetch you. The Lord your God will bring you into the land which your fathers possessed, that you may possess it, and he will make you more prosperous and numerous than your fathers. Verse 6. The Lord your God will circumcise your heart. This is, I think, the first time that circumcision of the heart is mentioned in Deuteronomy 30, verse 6. And it's never meant that it takes the place of the circumcision of young males in Judaism. It's always and, gam vegam, not or one taking the other place. Circumcise your heart and the heart of your offspring, so that you will love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, that you may live. See, what is the most important thing in the covenant? The love for God and people around you. The Lord your God will put all these fine print upon your foes and enemies who persecuted you, and you shall again obey the voice. Here's another situation of this verb of turning around, of the Lord, and keep all his commandments which I command you today, this day. The Lord your God will make you abundantly prosperous in all the work of your hands, in the fruit of your body, in the fruit of your cattle, and in the fruit of your ground. For the Lord will again, and here's another one of conversion, shall we say, your old habits into new ones. Take delight in prospering you as he took delight in your fathers. If you obey the voice of the Lord your God to keep his commandments and his statutes which are written in the book of the law. If you turn, that's another one, to the Lord your God with all your hearts and with all your soul. So, 7 times this turning around is mentioned, with much about really turning yourself in the first 4 verses, and much about life, and also God's involvement in the last 6. We have to make a choice. That's what it comes down to. We have to make a choice between life and death, between good and bad, a choice which needs to become uncomfortable. Leave your comfort zone, very important, because otherwise you'll never change. You will also always do something. You take that bandage, you take it off a wound, but you are so careful because you don't want to pain yourself, and so you leave this thing on, and it is rotting underneath. No, you need to really become uncomfortable and stand the pain of leaving old habits, because you get attached to them and they attach themselves to you, and make good choices and choose for life instead of the death and the rot. In chapter 30 of Deuteronomy, and then verse 19, Moses is talking about a legal expression when he says that he is asking for witnesses, and he says, I call heaven and earth to witness against you this day, for the judge. Heaven and earth are the judge, not the judge, they are the witnesses, that this day that I have set before you life and death, blessing and curse. Therefore, please choose life. I beg you, that you and your descendants may live, not eternal life. The commandments have never been anything that had to do with life, with eternal life, only quality of life, only. So Torah is not in the heavens and not on the other side of the ocean, not in the heavens. And Moses talks about that and uses those words, and don't go too fast through these words, because Torah has been in heaven. It comes from heaven. It's not in heaven. It was there, but in the meantime, the Torah is in our midst, on our laps, in our computer programs. And it's not overseas either. There is not. The Torah is not from overseas, where it comes from another country, where people with other habits and other kings and other laws and other behavior that is contra what God is desiring from us, brought to us, and no, it's not coming from there. Another environment. It's not there, it is just totally local. The Bible is a Mideastern book with Middle Eastern ways of making a covenant with the curse, meaning the fine print and stuff like that. And it is not at least for the people who are original, the Jewish people in the Middle East, and others, of course, also. That's not only Jewish people that live there, and not only Jews, because Moses is talking about other people than Jews also being there, but it is a locally understandable piece of information that is there. If you're living in the 21st century and you read this is not your normal, usual kind of culture that you're familiar with. So you need to read the Bible with new eyes. That's part of this whole study. New eyes, realize that this is not overseas. This text and these blessings and these promises are from God to Middle Eastern people. And you are the guest to see this and to make it yours, but behave as a guest, as a good guest, well-behaving guest. So God says no excuse. No excuse. It's close and it's familiar. You received what you needed to know, so we have the means that we need in order to live. And each time that we return and renew ourselves and let go the old bad behavior, we allow a piece of eternal life to be built into us. The reading text of today was Exodus 30, verse 11 through 14. And read that verse 14 again. The word is very near to you. It's in your mouth and it's in your heart so that you can do it. It's also a hint, because it is perhaps not in your mouth. And perhaps it isn't in your heart at this moment. Let it become that. That is verse 14, very important. Verse 6 is the circumcision of the heart. Verse 14 says, let the word be in your heart and in your mouth. Not in the heavens, not on the other side of the ocean. Those words about heaven and sea and ocean are repeated by King Solomon, King Shlomo, and his Proverbs. And he says in Proverbs 30, verse 4, who has ascended and come down? It's the same idea. Who has gathered the wind in his fists? Who has wrapped up the waters in a garment? Who has established all the ends of the earth? What is his name? And what is the name of his son? Surely you know. Interesting text. God has a son, this says. And you need to realize, let me say it like this, I'm looking for the right words. You need to realize what that word God's son means. You might know the term, but you might not know what it means. The name son of in Hebrew means many, many things. It could be, you can use the word to tell people how old you are. You can use the word son to threaten someone. The term is used when somebody threatens as you are a child of death, ben mavet in Hebrew. And it doesn't mean that somebody is a son of something in the terms of son of God. But son of God is also mentioned in the Bible. Ezekiel is a son of God, or he's the son of man, ben Adam, like Yeshua is mentioned as ben Adam, meaning in the Hebrew of nowadays on the streets and anywhere, ben Adam means somebody. You need to make yourself familiar with those terms in Hebrew to realize what they mean. And then you understand that word son of God, his son, is nothing else than the opposite of God in heaven. Is one God. God is one, not two. There is God in heaven, And he's able to project himself, as it were, from the spiritual realm into the earthly materialistic realm as son of God. In the same line like Yeshua is the son of David, while David is not his father, literally speaking. That is what is mentioned here. A dichotomy where God in heaven and God on earth are the same, and the fullness of God is the two of them, but being one. Do you understand? I don't, but that's what is presented to us. And Shlomo, King Shlomo, seems to realize that this Torah text that talks about, that Moses gave to him, talks about God's son. So what Deuteronomy says, this word should be in your mouth and in your heart. King Solomon says that's God. Word, God are equalized, are two aspects of the same thing, which in the Bible later on we see in the Gospel of John that God is the Word. The Word is God in chapter 1 of John. All these themes go together. The Bible is explaining itself by these lines, this red line that is there. As Word, it is able to come to us and go to heaven again. Living Torah. Yeshua is mentioned as the living Torah, the word, the living word. It is an expression. In Dutch, in the language in Holland, we call someone who has a lot of general knowledge a walking encyclopedia, which has parallels with the living Torah. And so this living Torah, which in Deuteronomy is called the Word, and by King Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, is called God, is the same. No wonder that John, in his testimony, in his gospel, talks literally about this situation. He says, no one, in John 3:13, no one has ascended into heaven but he who descended from heaven, the Son of Man. And so these three, Moses and King Solomon and John, and also Paul, the great rabbi and apostle, founder of congregations, comes and adds his wisdom in Romans chapter 10, and says the righteousness based on faith says, do not say in your heart who will ascend to heaven, because you can't. And he adds to that what he means, namely to bring Messiah and have him descend to us. No one has done that. And he also adds Romans 10 verse 7, the next verse. Or who will descend into the abyss, in the underworld. And he also adds, namely, to let Yeshua stand up out of the dead. He also adds to these texts. So now we have Moses and King Solomon and John and Paul saying the same thing. What are they talking about? No one does that? That's right. What does that mean? It means that there are things in our lives, very important things, that we need to see that only God can do. No one can do this. Only God can do this. And we need to realize that there are things in our lives, decisions we have to make, where we have to allow God to do things. We have to create a platform, an arena in which God can operate instead of only ourselves. I'll do this, I'll do that. There are things that we need to allow God to do for us, but we have the full responsibility of our own lives. We need to see that also. So it's not a cliche, it's not a dead thing to say, oh, God will do this, He will provide. That's too cheap to say it like that. There are things in which God necessarily has the role that we cannot fulfill, and we need to see that. Even in the life of the apostles, when a disciple had killed himself, and a 13th or replacement of the 12th, Judas Iscariot, had to be chosen. They used a stone in order to throw the lot and throw the dice in order to find out who would be that person. You might say, "Oh, that's wrong." They did it, and the Bible doesn't condemn them for this. But what I'm saying is that what they did with that action is to allow God to speak and act through this dice in order to have His way in choosing, instead of doing it in a human way. Sometimes we have too much human action to get somebody into choosing important biblical functions where God needs to be allowed to speak and act. So what we see is a beautiful example of how the Bible is explaining itself by these verses when we find them and put them together in a beautiful configuration. So what is it that Moshe wants to say to us in this text today? Moshe wants that Israel and we here today realize that the word is not far away but close. And the Bible shows that we can see this as not only the word, but also God Himself is not far away but close to us. That changes our lives. It makes our lives different than the lives of people who are not able at this moment to believe in God, or the life of people that see God as far away and are not able to grasp Him, and are at too great a distance. Our God is very close to us. To comfort, which I don't want to speak out the word as a very cheap term, but He does it if we allow Him. To encourage us, same thing. To help us to endure and to hold on and to keep on keeping on. And what do we read? Not only is God and the Word not far away, but also God and the Word is very close to us. In our mouth, in our hearts, in order to fulfill, in order to help us to continue and to endure. It's in our mouth. It says, well, you better have it in your mouth then. So this is why Yeshua, when he eats his last supper, the last Easter meal, the Pesach Seder, he talks about the eating. This is my body, because it needs to be second nature. Your whole body, soul, and spirit need to be changed and transfigured by that word of God, and it's possible to do it. And Coach Moses, who is leader of the winning team called Israel, speaks to them and encourages them. And not only Jews but also Gentiles are part of that. It's always a connection and a mingling, a mix of Jews and Gentiles. It always has been that way. We go to the next text, which is the Haftarah text, we will do that right now. Isaiah 62 verse 1 and 2, 4. The last of the 7 consolation texts. After that, Sunday night starting, is the feast of Rosh Hashanah, the Israeli New Year, the Feast of Trumpets. For Zion's sake, says God, I will not keep silent, and for Jerusalem's sake I will not rest until her vindication goes forth as brightness and her salvation as a burning torch. The nations will see your vindication, all the kings your glory. You shall be called by a new name which the mouth of the God will give. You will be a crown of beauty in the hands of the Lord, and a royal diadem in the hands of God, your God. You shall not more be called forsaken, and your land will no more be termed desolate. Instead, you will be called, my delight is in her, and your land married. For the Lord delights in you, and your land will be married. Beautiful text, and Isaiah is really good in encouraging and making this picture and saying God never rejected Israel. On the contrary, it goes through its tests with results. The fine print comes into motion. But ultimately, already Isaiah says this is what is happening. The beautiful future is bright and the light has come upon you. 7th consolation, Haftarah. And in the meantime, there is a job in the Bible that is calling for people into action. It's a job opening in which there is a question for a shomerim, watches. It is also clear that the position is not filled, but the conditions are there for waiters, watchers to come and to take their places. In verse 6 of Isaiah 62. Upon your walls, Jerusalem, I have set watchmen. All the day and all the night they shall never be silent. You who put the Lord in remembrance, take no rest. It's a very heavy duty, this waiter, this watcher, night watch and day watch. But we know from the history of Israel that there has always been a shortage for the real watchers. So it says God already established these people, but he did it in the shape and form of positions. Now he's waiting for the real watchmen and women. And what do they do? There are people who go to Israel and say, I'm a waiter on the walls, but you need to see what it calls for and what the requirements are, the job description. You really need to see that, because it might be different from the things you learn in your church. It is really loving Israel, but in such a way that you love the people who have this local. This word is not far away. It's close. It's in your mouth, in your heart, because you grew up with it. This is your regional language, this Bible. If you're not from the Middle East, if you're not from the Jewish faith originally, you need to learn that language. You need to learn that locale, and all these things. So these watchers, they know this. They help God remember his promises. Does God need that? No, he doesn't need that, but he is reading from this helping and this staying and having these watches and this being awake. He knows and reads in it the commitment of people being involved, and God will see and he will test who is choosing really for Israel and the God of Israel and the language of Israel and the Messiah of Israel, being Jewish, and the commandments of Israel, which the Messiah never kicked away. This is for Jews and Gentiles, Jews and soulmates. Israel is on a journey. Coach Moses speaks one of his last encouragements, final encouragements, because he's getting a transfer. And Moses will be transferred to a heavenly team where also Elijah, Eliyahu, Hanavi, the prophet, is playing into. And Moses and Elijah, you see them talking with the real coach, the heavenly coach, Yeshua, in Matthew chapter 17. But that's something that is for later. Israel is continuing its travels on earth still. And God is hoping in the meantime for waiters, for the day watch and the night watch, until that whole call is fulfilled. If you want to be a waiter, if you want to be for Israel, for your congregation, for your friends, for your children, for your family, for your friend or girlfriend, it's good to have this desire and to look into the job requirements, the job description, what it really means, not just fill in the things that you read in books because somebody took this and wrote a book, sometimes hateful to Messianic Jews. Even my name is mentioned in one of those. That's not the watcher, that's not the position that God was calling for. There are also false people walking on those walls, people under a flag which is different and strange and negative, but it doesn't fit. It doesn't add up, and you need to open your eyes and see this. But they come from Israel, and oh, it's beautiful. No, it's not always. There are people coming from Israel, living there perhaps or not, and they ask for money because they do this for sometimes for the Holocaust of people, or for people who are victims of terror attacks. But they put the money in their own pockets, and they have big mansions, and you don't know that, and you think, oh, we serve a good purpose. Be careful. And good leaders of good congregations talk to each other and warn each other. And I'm part of that gang. Very important, because then you can warn and not add to crimes that are committed. So we need to be careful. And the New Testament talks about this situation where there are false prophets. So sometimes you have to say no to a person who wants to speak. The Lord will not be silent. He gives his orders to his army, heavenly army. There will be deliverance. Israel will be renewed, a new name that God is going to give. And the bad words in Isaiah, Azuvah and Shmama, being left alone, being lonely, being desert, will change into Heftzivah, my desire, and Baal, being established or being married. So the Bible is promising a beautiful time for Israel, and the rest of the world needs to wait a little bit, or you need to join as a soulmate the faith and the God and the Word and the Messiah of Israel. Let's go to the last text today, Berit Chadashah, the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 7, verses 15 through 21. There we go. Beware of false prophets, warned you, who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly have they are ravenous wolves. You will know them by their fruits, but you need to be careful and count the facts, not your impressions. And God told me, look at the facts. It's a rare commodity these days. Are grapes gathered from thorns? No. Figs from thistles? No. So every sound tree bears good fruit, but the bad tree bears evil fruit. A sound tree cannot bear evil fruit, nor can a bad tree bear good fruit. Sounds logical, but sometimes we allow these things to be mingled. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil in paradise was an example of this, was not cut down because it was a teaching tool. Not to eat from. You don't eat from teaching tools. You just look at it and say, oh yes, yeah, we should not mingle good and evil. That's what it was. Therefore you will know them by their fruits. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, says Yeshua, will enter the kingdom of heaven. Only the person who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. This is how important Torah and commandments are for Yeshua. There are many ways in which the testing takes place. God allows all means, which is sometimes very scary, but it helps, because through it he knows who is real and who is not. That makes it necessary to be critical for us. And even your congregation might be an unsafe place. It's not the perfect situation, the perfect place that you would expect it to be. It's not. Reality is catching up if you open your eyes. So we're still in this test phase, in this testing phase. We're still in the probing and in the examining phase for ourselves. We are probed, we are examined. Big Brother is really watching us, and we need to be careful and not to be afraid. You have nothing to be afraid of if you do it good. You might be afraid of people, but then God says don't be afraid of people. So the real closure of the new covenant, also like with Moses, who cut it first in Exodus and then still again in Deuteronomy, with Yeshua, needs to take place, still needs to take place. Still false prophets walking around trying to take you away and distract you from your purpose and your goal. As leader of a congregation, I said it and I repeat it, if you have contact with, if you stay in contact with your colleagues and you warn each other for these false prophets, It helps. I speak from experience for years. So the text in Matthew talks about this. Watch, beware of the false prophets. A good tree doesn't produce false prophets. They will be in the day of judgment. They will be cut down. Not everybody that you hear say, "Lord, Lord," to Yeshua, he's talking. He says, "To me, will enter the kingdom of heaven. Only people who do the will of my Father who is in heaven." So what's the warning? The warning is, look at the fruits, look at the results, because the results, like in Corona time, in COVID time, the results will help you to understand whether things are bad or good. Don't say we don't do the testing because then we won't be bothered by the results. Don't ever be bothered by the facts. The facts help for you to determine your course or make corrections. Don't think, oh, it's Jewish, must be good. Oh, speaking in tongues must be good. Oh, great, big congregation must be good. Or miracles must be good. Oh, soft voice, very good. Or a powerful leader must be good. Nothing is good until you really see results. Watch, compare, ask questions. Why is that important? Look at what Yeshua says. Not everybody who says, "Oh Lord, Lord," will enter the kingdom of heaven. Only people who do the will of my Father. So we need to be careful in our behavior toward each other, in the way we behave, in the way we are courteous, in doing God's will, showing this to others without being a person who is giving unasked advice, unsolicited advice. Last week I received a letter from people who say, "Read these 2 documents which I send you, because in them you will see how I think about Yeshua." But Yeshua, I don't know the person. It's a couple. I'm not going to read it. I'm not even going to answer. Don't do that. Be courteous. Behave as a child of God needs to behave. And Yeshua gives the examples. Read him. This is how it went wrong already in paradise. There was a test, and people got a second chance by being ousted out of paradise and make an incredible long journey to get back in if they behave well. And as the book of Revelation says, if you are in victory, then you will be allowed to come in again. Improvement of behavior. It should only be better and better. All tricks out. Each time that you return to God, you allow a piece of eternal life being built into you. You don't do it yourself, God does it, but you allow and give space and opportunity to do that. I'm finishing with the 7 steps. I return to the Torah portion, Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 1 through 10, and I show you a situation of a development in these 7 steps. They add up, and it is a composition which gives you a picture of a development, a spiritual growth that would help, I hope, and wish for you and myself. And we're never finished with this process until the day comes that God makes up the bill and gives us our cheshbon. So the first one in those 7 steps is taking it to heart. You will see it in your screen. Taking these things to heart. You say, "Yes, I know it already." I'm not talking about your mental qualities. I'm talking about the heart, where also you have the emotional value of things that are part of the whole situation. It's not only a matter of, there are people that come to congregations, they stay there for a while, they are beautiful, exemplary people, and then they leave and they say, "Nice, I learned something." That's not what it is. It's not learning. Of course, learning is part of the process. But what it is, it needs to change yourself. And if you're in the process of changing, you would never be finished with that. Why would you leave? I'm not saying that you should stay till your dying day necessarily, but only saying that you have learned so much and that therefore we can go now. might be the wrong motive, might be something you never took it to heart. That's the first step. The second step, building on that, is turn to the Eternal One, your God. It's in this text, all to do with turning around. Turn to the Eternal, your God. You might say, oh, I did that 20 years ago. It's like a person, like a woman who is asking, a wife who's asking her husband, hey, Johnny, do you really love me? And Johnny answers and says, well, don't bother me. I told you that 20 years ago. Turn to God and let him know with all your heart and all your love and all your gratefulness that you are turning to him. How much time, how often do you do this? It's good to do this. The third step in this 7-step program, it's not a 12-step program of Alcoholics Anonymous that I've been involved in as a helper, counselor, but it's the 7-step program to really get closer to God. The third one is God will turn things around. God will, as a third step in the 7, already then, when you took things to heart and turn to God, God will begin to turn things around and he will take care of you. Nice to know, he takes care of me. Sometimes it's a cliche, he takes care of you. You need to feel if he does. You need to be honest about this. I don't feel that God takes care of me. Say it, be honest. Say it, because he will, but perhaps you don't measure well. Your measuring needs to be calibrated. He does it. Make sure. Remember. Tomorrow you remember today. Yes, he did something. And you compare today with tomorrow and you say, yes, he did something again. The fourth one, he brings together from all nations. He will bring together people from all nations. Now this is to be taken literally, where Jews from all parts of the world come to Israel to live there. Which is the literal meaning of the text, but the spiritual meaning of the text is for everybody, and that is that he'll bring people together in congregations, hopefully, in your neighborhood. He brings people together from all nations, or the influence of all these nations, and bring them together where people say, I come from this congregation, I come from this nation, and I'm influenced by certain factors in that nation. Either I live there, or I watch it on TV, or I listen to it as music, or a way of thinking and philosophy, whatever it is. I realized that I grew away from God. God will bring people together from all nations in that sense. That's the fourth situation, where you're not on your own, but you are going to recognize and meet and learn together. The fifth step of the 7 is that you turn around, excuse me for the mistake, turning around and listen to the voice of the Lord. Now you need to learn in your process of growth to listen to the voice of the Lord. Don't say to, oh, I hear that. God speaks in local idiom. He says, the Torah is not far away, it's close, and it's in your mouth and your heart. He's talking to Jews, Middle Eastern people. Learn to read the language of Middle Eastern people. Read that Bible again as if you've never read it before, with the knowledge and the insights that you realize might not have been there, but you're willing to learn, and then turn around and listen to the voice of the Lord, because he speaks in ways that might not always be comfortable. It needs to be radical, and so it might be that you need to do something that helps you to get out of your comfort zone, things that you were used to. We always did this, and our parents also did it. Well, might be very nice for in a way of sentimental mood, but might not. And you don't betray your people around you or your parents, because they did their best. But if you develop and discover a way that God has shown you, everybody who really loves you will allow you to go down that road. That's number 5. Number 6, the Lord will rejoice in you again. He did it when he met you, because he saw your future. and he can foresee how beautiful and how victorious you will be. Then he is testing. He's not always so rejoicing, but now he's doing it again. As step 6, he will rejoice in you again. And the 7th one, now you need to turn around to the Lord again. In a more conscious way, after these 6 steps, you turn to the Lord, your God, and now you do it with all your heart and your soul, which is different. Now you do it with all your capacities, all your faculties in you. Turn around to God and let him finish this process, which will never be finished while on earth. May God bless you in this. I wish you a beautiful new year, the year 5783. And I wish you Shana Tova, Umetuka, a good and sweet new year. And for today, Shabbat Shalom.